Hold on, 2 seconds. I'm gonna go in the back this way for a sec.
That's pretty amazing, right?
Huh. We have our own sink. We never have to leave.
All right, excellent. So,
Yeah, we can go now.
so thank you everyone for attending and welcome to the community endeavor. For those of us who have just joined us, we are pleased to welcome Deb Nicholson to talk to us about the people side of our projects. Thank you very much for coming down.
Yay! All right, thanks for having me. I kind of went all in on the bug thing. So if bugs creep you out, you're going to want to not look at the slides. But I was thinking about, like, when we have problems, we file bugs, right? So the people side has its own problems, and open source is all about the people. I think most of us, we want to be welcoming, and we're like trying to like always be like, come on in, or join us here, or be part of our project. But sometimes we make mistakes. We leave an opportunity on the ground, or we're trying to be funny and cool, and we messed it up. Or we somehow like conveyed, like, we're like, oh, a mustache contest, that's so fun. And then it's like, wait, we kind of just conveyed we're only expecting men here. Or something else where it's like, oh, only young people are welcome here, or only people without children. Because we thought like we'd add this fun thing, and then like halfway through it was like, uh-oh, that's not for everyone. That's only fun for me, or for the person who thought of it. So this is, when you've got that kind of a situation, or maybe one where you sort of convey disrespect for non-coders in some way, which a lot of projects do. They're like, oh, well, this is real devs only, whatever, or that kind of thing. So, basically, like, we've made a mistake of omission. We've forgotten to include everybody that we actually want to have be part of our projects. And this might be like all male panels, which sort of says to the world, like, our organizers didn't care enough to try and find anyone who wasn't a man to be on this panel. Or stuff where it's like, wow, is it ever white in here? My husband is not white, and he went to an event with me once. I won't call them out because it's the event, because they're not the only one. But he was like, wow, is it ever white in here? And I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I knew that, but I didn't know that until I heard you say it. I didn't realize, like, wow, I bet it feels really weird to be here for you. So, it can be tricky. And sometimes things that, don't look weird or harmful to us look weird or harmful to other people. And so, come to our meetup. It's at this dude's house. You just go down this dark alley. You'll know you're there because the light's out. And then you just knock on this door and ask for Spud. And it's like, oh, I think I'm busy that day. I didn't say what day it was. Yeah, I'm busy whatever day it is. So it's like stuff that might not seem weird to you because they're like, Spud's great, his basement's awesome, and no. Another thing that might happen, exclusionary language, like where you think you're being welcoming and you've kind of said like, hey, I'm gonna get my guys on this, or like, I want all you guys to come, or something like that, where it's like, oh, I could do better, maybe folks, or, minor mistakes, not like, I'm not talking like kind of Hitler level stuff here. So, I feel like I have to qualify that now being from the US, right? Anyway, negative experiences have real consequences for project health. This is from the open source survey, and they said that 21% of the people who had experienced or witnessed a negative behavior said they stopped contributing to that project because of it. And so, like, not only is it like the person it happens to, like, it also, like, some 30% of people have witnessed something happening to someone else and have been like, yeah, that's cool, I'm gonna go find something else to do. So these are bugs. These are things that we could fix in our projects. So when your spidey sense says, like, I feel like we could be doing better, think about, like, what that is. This is not for everything. Don't, like, file a bug with your community if you should be calling the police, for instance. These are for minor fixable things. I just want to, I don't want you to be like, oh, yeah, I saw someone stabbing a person, and then I I said, hey, stabbing's not cool here. Like, no. This is not for that problem. That's a different problem. I hope you don't have that problem. And oh God, now that if you do, you're gonna think of me. Which I asked for that. Anyway, so method 1, calling in. So people know what calling out is. You like take to Twitter, you tell the internet, like you do it in public. Calling in is different. I used to book bands before I decided to spend that energy with free software. And I was friends with this band, they were called Hoag. And almost no one had heard of them when I was booking them at this like divey place called the Chopping Block. And they were playing maybe like their 3rd show. There were probably like 5 or 6 people that were not roommates or significant others of the band, and me. But so they rip into like their 2nd song, and one of the people in the band misses the opening. The lead singer is on the mic, and he says, okay, let's just start again, which is totally fine, right? But then he gives the rhythm guitarist a look, and he says, and maybe next time we can figure out how to play our own song. And it was like, ooh, oh, you, And he's probably thinking like, oh, this is funny, self-deprecating humor. And I pulled him aside later, and I said, yeah, it sounded like you came off as mean. You seemed really mean. and you also kind of broadcasted that you don't think the musicians you're playing with are very good, which is like a really weird thing to do, because there's only like 5 people here that don't already know you, and now they're going to be like, yeah, that band, I mean, they're not good musicians or anything. Like you just told them that that's what they should think. So, so I let him know. I'm like, don't do that again. Like, if you want people to think like you're good. And you're probably thinking, Deb, I don't have a band, right? But in open source, we're often on stage. Like, we do all this stuff transparently. We have all our mailing lists everywhere, and in channel, et cetera, et cetera. So we're like kind of on stage all the time. So if you're gonna slag your rhythm guitarist on IRC, everyone's gonna see it, for instance. So calling in effectively. We'll take a look at this. So first, I took him aside. I didn't like yell from the audience like, hey, don't tell everyone your band sucks. I waited until they were finished, and I pulled him aside, and I said, like, yeah, I don't think that had the impact that you thought it did. And I assumed that he wasn't trying to be mean. I said, it made you seem mean. I didn't say you are mean. I said that made you seem mean, which is, it's an easier place to have a conversation from. Like, if you say to someone like, oh, well, you're evil, they're going to be like, cool, I don't want to hear anything else from you about me. Because that's how we are. We're like, kind of like, we don't like to hear that. But if you say like, oh, you like created an impression that you were evil or mean or something, maybe evil's not the best word, but, and then kind of focused on the future. I started planting a seed, like, maybe next time consider another option, or share that in band practice. Like, I actually kind of recommended calling in my calling in, which is sort of recursive, but, and they never did that again. And they have like a Wikipedia entry and everything, so they're for real. And then they all had babies, and now they don't do rock anymore. But that's okay. So then the question is, like, so if that's how you do calling in, why is it you, right? Why are you doing the calling in? So in this case, I had booked the band, so I already had a relationship. And maybe you're the person who has, like, a seat at the table. Like, you hear something, and you're like, oh, like, I have a seat at the table, or I'm involved, or you've asked me to, like, promote your event, or promote your project, or do something, so you have, like, some standing, as opposed to, like, hey, I just kind of sea-lioned in here to say, like, you're doing it wrong. It's not as effective as, like, hey, given our shared goal around this thing, and we want this event to go off well, like, we should probably consider not having an all-male panel. So if you have that opportunity, then you can use it. You also might have, like, kind of the perspective. So maybe you're newer to the project or something like that, or you can see a giant bug that the people in the room cannot. And so you're like, oh, yeah, that word is, we cannot use that word, for instance. It might be one where it's like, oh, we use that one in Europe all the time, and it's totally fine. It's like, not here. maybe you have ones that, or we have ones that we use and you wish we didn't. So you say, when you do X, it looks like Y. So, and then try to give them some help. If you're not trying to do Y, try Z instead. So like, let's go back and, the giant bug. So when you have an all-male panel at your conference, it looks like you're not trying to involve women in your event. So if you're not trying to convey that, try putting some women on your panel. So that's, just one example. So a few caveats. A lot of people don't like having a bug put in their ear. Like, they don't like, like, hey, psst, you're doing it wrong. Like, it gets us that little, why are you telling me, So you want to be gentle when you do this. You try to give people like, hey, like, I understand you're trying to make this a really welcoming project, and I just, I'm trying to help you out here. It's like a bug. If you don't know you have a bug, then you can't fix it. So it's kind of got to be in that helpful spirit. And stick up for folks, but don't speak for others. This is like, especially in a small community, if like, so I know someone who had like a poor experience with like a particular employer, but if I said like, oh, and I describe, they only have one opening, they know exactly who I'm talking about. And if they didn't want to say, I didn't particularly like your, job interview experience, then it's not for me to say like, I know someone who thought your job interview thing was terrible and you suck at hiring. And they're going to be like, yeah, that's like only one person in the last couple months, so I know exactly who you mean, and so, but that's not for me to say, right? So don't, it can be like, yeah, I want everyone to know, I want to patch all the bugs, but don't speak for others unless you've been given express permission. And then also giving people options instead of threats. This is, I wish I could attribute this better because I love it. And for whatever it's worth, I'm like, notepad. So try, instead of be like, oh, if you don't stop using that language, like, your project is going to be dead to us, and like, the world will hate you. You kind of be like, hey, maybe you want to try, like, just maybe not talk about that part, or use a different word, or, put code of conduct on that. So you want to give people options instead of threats. Like, I could go to Twitter with this. It's like, that's never going to be super motivating. And then you got to set a good example. So if we know people don't really like being called in, so when someone comes and takes your head off, you have to be gracious. And you're like, well, thank you so much for letting me know, even if they weren't as gentle as you would wish they had been, because then you sort of set this tone in your project and in your communities that like, yes, I would like for you to tell me when I am saying words that are weird or making people uncomfortable or setting up a situation where people don't feel welcome. So you got to set that example. In addition to calling in, method number 2, communicating shared norms. So outside of open source, we have a lot of ways where we figure out what shared norms are. Like, you probably learned to tie a tie if you're a tie wearer. And there are things like, there are just things like you don't wear the tie around your head unless you're like a Aerosmith basically. But and there are other things that are normal, like you don't wear a pirate costume to a golf course unless it's that kind of golf course. But and if you're not Ferris Bueller, you don't jump up on the float at a parade. There's just things you don't do. We know that. You went to a parade at some point and you saw that there was a participant and observer thing. Like, no one said like, hey, if you're not part of the parade, don't jump in. But you knew, like, it was kind of like, just kind of in the air. Our stuff is a little weirder, like, it's, like, what's normal here, right? So sometimes we have to take people aside and be like, yeah, that's not going to make you any friends here, and some, you don't necessarily have to pull someone aside. You might just be more explicit about sharing best practices, things that you do, like, oh, yeah, well, we're transparent because. So not just like, why don't you show everyone the mailing list? You're kind of like narrate what you're doing and say like, we show everyone the mailing list because we're committed to transparency and it helps us like see what's going on and everybody has a sense of where they fit in the process, et cetera, et cetera. So you can do this like both for individuals and for groups. So basically you want to be the kind of community member that you want your community to look like, because you're in there. So some of the things that are normal here, like for instance, like respecting the licenses and respecting the patent clauses. Like people don't necessarily know this unless they come in. And so, you know, I'd love to see us do more to share our stories and to talk about like, hey, we chose this license because of this, or, you know, we like to, you know, give badges to people when they have committed their first patch and things like that. So you can kind of like always be narrating what you're doing, and that helps people who are like on the fringes of our community thinking of joining, like, oh, okay, I see how it's going to be, and I know why they do this, and you know, the more you can explain what you're doing, the better it is for someone who's like on the fringe considering joining. And like with regards to the patent clauses, like getting help for your lawyers because they don't natively want to share. Lawyers are not like, that's not a thing they teach them in law school. Like, hey, we're all about the sharing. And they're like, no, we never had that class at law school. We definitely did not have that class. So, you know, so for us, like, you know, like if you're at a larger project and you have lawyers or you have people doing legal work for you, can, you know, try and encourage them to meet other lawyers so that they can find out like how we do things here. And you can pass along resources that you find helpful, which is great. And also like kind of letting people know if you're in this, like if you're working on one specific technology, like when you come here to like free and open source software, you might find yourself seeing the same people for like 2, 3, 10 years. So if you behave like it's the holodeck your first week in, it's going to be bad. It's not good. Like I live in a city, Boston, Massachusetts. We have like a first night thing. Do you guys have that here? It's like on New Year's Eve. Okay. So New Year's Eve is like, it's a big drinking holiday in the US. And so like what happens is people come in, okay, you have this. All right, people come in from the subway, like on the subway, like from the suburbs, and they behave like, you know, everything they do is like, doesn't count, because it's like the city, it's all anonymous. It's like, no one sees me like peeing on the trash can and puking on the bus. It's like, no, we see you. Like, it's like, what if you want to move here someday? Like, well, we'll know. Like, but open source is not big enough for you to come in and pee on the trash can and puke on the bus, is what I'm saying. So if we can kind of help to communicate that shared norm, like, hey, so the way that, like, because we all talk to each other. Like, if your workplace is like, oh, yeah, like, because I work on the patent issue, it's like, everyone knows. They're like, oh, you work for that company that sues everybody. It's like, so then when you're like, cool, we have openings, everyone's like, yeah, I don't want to work for the evil company that sues everybody. You know, but there's other things, too. It's like, you know, the ladies, we talk. Like, so if your workplace is one of those workplaces, we all know. So everyone's like, oh, no women apply. And it's like, yeah, I have a mirror for you. I can show you that problem. It's, so communicating those shared norms, because otherwise we will tell people that you're not doing them. So I would say, you know, as much as possible, share your story so that people know, like how you're doing things, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then that will help other people outside the community figure out how to do it. So becoming an entomologist, bugs can be beautiful, right? If you don't know why you're not making progress, then having someone tell you, like, oh, you're using this word that's super offensive, or like, hey, you're trying to get school teachers involved in your elementary school platform and you're having all your meetings at 10 p.m. Guess what? Elementary school teachers get up at 6 a.m. They're not coming to a 10 p.m. meeting, especially if it's at Spud's basement. But, you know, so you might be like, oh, I guess nobody cares about software for elementary schools. It's like, no, you got to stop having your meetings at 10 p.m. And it's like, oh, wow, wow, okay, that's like much better than the sad thing where nobody cares about elementary school software. So, so the like bugs can be really great because then you're like, oh, that's what's wrong. Thank you so much. But they have to be offered in the spirit of friendship, because you know, so you can like, I see what you're trying to do there, and I think that this might be keeping you from being as successful as you could be. So it's like in this like spirit of like, I want to help, not like I enjoy telling people they're doing it wrong. There's like, people can tell which one you're coming from, and they respond accordingly for certain. So I did go fast, so we will have time for a couple questions. Picture credits, because they're important, and then one last bug for you guys. Thank you so much.
My daughter, my little Marine K for Orlando, and sorry, can't put that.
Yeah, orange sweater here.
Do you have any advice on using email versus in person?
It depends on, like, it kind of depends on the mood that you normally communicate in, I think. So, like, if everything happens in IRC, you know, then you might want to back channel there. Because sometimes, like, so I used to have this boss who would, like, send me, like, he almost never messaged me anything except, like, can you come to my office? I'm like, so I go in and I'm like, I'm not nervous, what's up? And he's like, oh, we're out of paper towels. I'm like, okay. So, but I'm saying, like, try and, like, if it's a small issue, keep it, like, within your normal channels. But if it's big, you might say, like, you know, but give them a little bit of a sense, like, you don't want to ambush people. So you say, like, hey, I noticed that we've been having a lot of static on the mailing list, and I wondered if you had time for a quick phone call to talk about it. Like, not just like, we need to talk. So give people a little context. Yeah.
How would you manage a situation where you call in a single person a lot of times so that he or she does not understand what you are meaning? What would you do?
Yeah, so hopefully you have a code of conduct for your project, and you can say, like, so I keep asking you about this in the spirit of, like, trying to help you get with the rest of the community and the way that we want to do things here. And I would even say, like, you know, if it is more important to you to use, I don't know, pictures of dominatrices in your slides, then maybe this isn't the correct community for you. Then, you know, whatever it is, like, you're like, I keep, you know, if that seems more important than kind of going with what makes everyone else in our community comfortable, then this may not be the right place for you. Right here.
How do you get out of a bad place?
How do you get out?
Yeah.
Open the door.
let's say, like, you give a lot of good tips, I think, and,
Yeah.
and important stuff, but what if things have already gone bad? How do you get back from that?
Yeah, so there's, like, you have to decide what level of commitment you have to that project. Like, Sage Sharp said once, there are a lot of open source projects, but there's only one me. So if you find, like, you're trying to help a project and everyone there is mean and terrible, and you've tried to be like, let's be polite, or why don't we try to, you know, keep the name calling off the mailing list, and you've done it again and again, you're losing sleep, you're spending hours and hours, it might not be the right place for you. I would say go find a project that appreciates you. I'm sure folks in here could recommend one if you're looking to hop to something else. But I would say you have to weigh your investment and look at, like, how much, you know, like, if you've got, like, 1 or 2 people amongst 50, like, kick them out. If you've got 50 people that suck and you and one last person that doesn't suck left, go find something else to spend your time on. I mean, you know, if it's your job, you might take a little while to get extricated, but yeah, don't stay places as everyone else is like, nope, it's super important that we're mean here. And you're like, I don't like that, so this is not a good place for me.
I like to say I'm not required to spend my free time working on your free software.
Yeah,
Give
that's
me
a good
motivation
one.
to be here.
Cool. Are we good? Do we have one more? Or?
We totally have one more. There's one more question. If not, we're going to transition.
I was gonna take it.
Okay.
Staying on the topic of like things have already gone bad.
Yeah.
What are good first steps? If, like, I'm not thinking
Mhm.
that you are the only